Hi everyone, my name is Maanya and welcome back to my channel. So, it's been a month since I first recorded my first video, and it's been, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks since I uploaded my first video. And the biggest change between that is that I decided to invest in a mic because my audio quality from the first video was terrible. Welcome back to my channel, Chai with Manya, and I decided for my second video ever, I wanted to talk about the reasons why I disliked the Bridgerton books. And when I talk about Bridgerton, I'm going to be talking explicitly about the books itself, not the TV shows. So I want to get that cleared out. And there might be a little spoilers, so if you want to read the books or you're planning to read the books and you don't want any spoilers, I will suggest skipping out on some of the parts. Anyways, let's get right into it. So, right away, I want to get off the bat and say that I am a huge fan of the TV shows. I genuinely really enjoyed the TV shows, except for season 3. I think season 3 was kind of eh. And I also enjoyed the spin off TV show, Queen Charlotte. But because I enjoyed the TV show so much, I decided I wanted to read the books because oftentimes what happens is when a book gets adapted to a movie or a TV show, they often lose out on some of the more like smaller details. Oftentimes in the book, they just do a better job of portraying the character development as well as the story plot lines kind of easier to understand. In TV shows, because they have a limited time to fit everything in, they cut out some of the important parts. So I thought I will read the books. And me being me, I decided that I'm gonna buy all of the first 4 books at one go because I was going on a trip to Italy, and I thought I will read all 4 books because I thought it was pretty obvious and I'm gonna enjoy it. But I did not enjoy it at all, and I'm gonna get into the reasons why now. So, firstly, I kind of want to introduce you to the background of Bridgerton just to get the basic idea of what it's about in case some of you guys have forgotten. So, I have my laptop here, which where I've written down details so I don't forget stuff. But basically, Bridgerton is an 8 novel Regency romance novels written by Julia Quinn, and it was released from 2000 to 2006. So within 6 years, she released 8 books, which is very impressive, honestly. Writing 6 books, 8 books in 6 years, that's really impressive. And the books are based between 1813, the year 1813, and 1827, and it follows 8 siblings of the Bridgerton family as they navigate London high society in search of basically marriage. So basically, it's all 8 books follow the 8 siblings of Bridgerton, and as they're searching for marriage and love and their place in society, but mostly it's just about marriage and romance. And the novels were then adapted by the Shondaland production television production company, and it turned into a television which, as most of you probably know, airs on Netflix. And the first season aired in 2020, and the season 3 aired in last year 2024, and season 4 is currently in works. So one important aspect or one important thing to keep in mind is that Bridgerton, as I mentioned, follows 8 siblings, and each book is about one sibling. The first novel follows Daphne, and the second novel follows Anthony, and so on. And each book centers on that particular sibling, and it follows their particular romance and marriage. I mean, how they find a partner to marry. The eldest brother is Anthony. Then the second one's Benedict. Then there's Colin, Daphne, Eloise, Francesca. G. Wait, after Francesca, Gregory, and then Hyacinth. And I've only read the first 4 books, so I've read Daphne's story because even though they're named in alphabetical order, the first book was published. The first book that was published was of Daphne's. So I've read Daphne's story, Anthony's story, Colin's no Benedict's story, and Colin's story. And the TV show currently covers Daphne, Anthony, and Colin. I read the first 4 books, and I never felt a desire to read the last 4 books, so that's why I never read them because when I read the first books, I kind of got an idea of what the next four are going to look like, and I'm going to explain why that is. One of the biggest reasons why was because the book itself and the characters in the books have literally zero personality. I mean, it's kind of like mind-boggling to me how much of a lack of personality there is in the books. It's very funny to me because the TV shows are very famous for their diversity. They're famous for the depth of emotions shown. They're famous for a lot of stuff. But all the reasons the TV shows are famous for, the books are not. I mean, they're not incorporated in the books. And the TV shows basically, when I say they have zero personality, what I mean is that all the characters, all the men in the book are very typical macho men, and they're very the toxic type of men. And the women, they all start off in the books as like strong-willed women, but then they often come, all of them come off as very naive and innocent and shy, and just like they're just lacking awareness of society and of what life really is. And what I found kind of irritating with the women is all of the women in the shows, I mean the books, all of the women, they only had one goal on their mind, and that's marriage. And see, now I do understand this is set in the 1800s, especially the early 1800s, and society back then, life back then was very different. Different, it was a very patriarchal society. The ultimate goal of a woman was often just to get married and produce kids, and the ultimate goal of a man was to take care of his family by making sure he can financially provide for the family. But I feel like after a while, because again, these are 8 books in the series, reading the same thing for every 8 book, like the same personality for every 8 book gets very boring very quickly. You're seriously telling me that out of 8 siblings, not one person has a different personality type? Like, that's bullshit to me. I mean, me and my brother have a lot of similar common interests, but we both have very different personalities, and we're just 2 siblings. So you're telling me 8 siblings, no difference in personalities? And that's just to me very boring to read. And like moving on with that, like building up, what doesn't help is that the plot lines are so stale. Like every single book follows a specific pattern of events and a specific structure of build up of events. The romance, the love stories of every book is same. The pacing of events of every book is same. The misunderstandings of every book is the same. Even the spicy scenes are same, and even the conflicts of the books are same. So you basically get it. Everything is same that it gets so repetitive. Every book starts off with the girl, the Bridgerton guy or the girl, kind of starting off as like, oh, I don't want to get married, or some of them do want to get married, but they're like, oh, I can't find anyone. I'm just kind of struggling, and then they find someone, but they don't initially like them, or they do like them, but there's kind of conflict. There's some sort of forbidden romance or something like that, and then they eventually fall for each other, and then there's some conflict, and then it ends. But the conflicts are always the same. The romance, the build up, everything is same. And like I said, the build up, because it's so same, it's so repetitive. They're reading the same thing for literally 8 books. I mean, I only read the 4 books, but for me, even reading the same thing for 4 books, it was so boring that I really did not enjoy. Like, I knew by the time I was reading Colin's book that what exactly was gonna happen, because the plot line is same and there is no characterization. The characters are so boring, and because the plot lines so boring. And again, what doesn't help is that the pacing of these stories are very slow. Like, very, very slow. I remember when I was reading Daphne's book, which is The Duke and even the first book, I was already really bored. It was like I was forcing myself to finish because I had bought the book, so I'm not gonna let the money go to waste. But it was I was forcing myself to read because I genuinely was not interested. It was so boring, even like Daphne's book, because it was just very slow paced. I know certain romance books are slow paced, certain books are slow paced, but even if they're slow paced, there often is like events going on. There often is chemistry. There often is different kind of stuff that kind of keeps you interested and like cooped into the book. But for I don't know why, but Julia Quinn's writing just is very slow paced and it's very stale, in my opinion. It takes a really long time for the romance to build up. And, I think it takes like 50% or 60% of the book for the romance to build up. That by that point, you're just so tired and you're just kind of tired of waiting around that you end up losing interest. And again, because the pacing's very slow after the first two books, it just gets very repetitive. Now, another reason why I didn't enjoy the books, and a lot of people did not enjoy the books, is the lack of themes in the books. What I mean by lack of themes is that the books only touch very surface level emotional issues and surface level any sort of themes, really. A lot of people had an issue with this because they really talk about a conflict or they touch upon a conflict but they don't end up going deeper, which I personally think derives the books and the characters from like character development. And I feel like a lot of times readers, they want to see character development. They don't want to see the the protagonist being same in the beginning of the book and remain same throughout, because everyone has their own issues. No one's correct. No character is correct. Every character has a weak point. But we like it when, as human beings, we just like it when people get better and change for the good. But because of the lack of themes, because of the lack of issues that are dealt with, we never see this character development. And I think that's one thing that's kind of sad for me, because there are a lot of like, I don't want to say toxic, but there are a lot of themes that are troublesome that the author could have dived in deeper to, but it never happened. So, for example, in the first book, they never really explore why Simon does not want kids. And there's also a particular scene in the first book, which if you watch the TV show, you may know what I'm talking about. And if you've researched on the books, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but a lot of people have an issue with it. And I do agree that I feel like Quinn just really moved very quickly from that particular scene in the books. So they never talk about it. They never really overcome that. They just move on. Similarly in the fourth book, she never really explores Colin's jealousy when it comes to Penelope's writing and how successful her writings become. I feel like with the fourth book, Colin is a very very insecure man, and I really wish very insecure and very unconfident man, and I really wish she spent more time um helping Colin overcome that personality traits and just helping him see that he can be confident, because he's very underconfident, and just showed us a better idea, a better way of how he got over that. Similarly in third book, which is Benedict's book, Sophie, the main character, she comes from an abusive family because her father died and she was left behind with her stepmother and stepsister. It's a classic Cinderella story. But they never explore Sophie's abusive past or her abusive relations with her stepmother and her stepsisters. They never touch upon the fact that she never grew up in a happy household. They never touch upon the fact that she was mistreated, she was abused against, like emotionally abused. They just kind of brush past that. And they really, really, she had a really good chance there to give Sophie a strong character, a bit more independent character, because Sophie had been through a lot, and it would have been really nice to see her stand up for herself and not rely on a man to get herself to make herself be safe and loved in society. I'm interested to see how they're going to adapt that to in the TV shows, because I love Benedict. He's one of my favorite characters in the shows, so I'm really interested to see how they're going to develop that. So again, I feel like the books, they don't do a good job with the lack of themes or just dealing with troublesome themes. But on the other hand, I do think the TV shows do still a better job of dealing with all those stuff. Of course, we have to keep in mind that this was set in the 1800s. Life back then was very different. Society was very different. Social expectations were very different. So we can't compare the books to modern times, which I think a lot of readers do. and a lot of people do. I think with Bridgerton, there are a lot of readers that are only reading the book because they're fans of the TV shows, not because they like to read. And because of that, they end up comparing the books setting to current modern setting. So we do have to, while we're reading the book, we do have to keep in mind that this was set in the 1800s. Things were very different back then. And I think it's also important to keep in mind that this was also published in the early 2000s, and I feel like early 2000s, which were 25 years ago, is it was a very different society than it is now, you know. Diversity, LGBTQ, just racism, everything was so much more different even 20 years ago than it is now. So I do want to give Julia Quinn the grace of that fact, but again, just the I mean, she's not excused from the boring characterization and the boring plot lines. I know that a lot of users and a lot of online readers have an have a problem with the lack of diversity, the very patriarchal gender dynamics, and the very patriarchal roles in society in the books. But again, like I said, this was set in the 1800s. This was written in the early 2000s. You can't compare it to 2025 and expect it to be like 2025. This was more than 200 years ago. The good thing about the Bridgerton TV shows is that the characters have a much bigger and a better personality in the TV shows than they have in the books. Which also, like, the conflicts and the romance and the build up is so much better in the TV shows. It's so much more um grasping, I would say. So it genuinely invites the viewer to be invested in your story, unlike the books. My experience reading this book was, I've read a lot of books that have been adapted to TV shows and movies, and I've always found the books better. But I think this was one of the very first times I read a book, and I thought, who the hell will read this book and think it's a good story to adapt? I'm honestly really surprised it got picked up to be adapted, because the books really are not it, in my opinion. There are more issues with the books, and people have different issues as well with the books, but these were really the issues I had with the books. Another thing that I do want to add on is that the TV shows are also quite different than the books in terms of, well, most things. The TV shows do follow the very basic plot line of the books, but they add in so much more elements, and I just love the inclusivity of the TV shows in terms of body sizes as well. Like, Penelope is one of my favorite characters. The one good thing the TV shows have also done is that they have made the presence of Lady Whistledown so much larger. Lady Whistledown in the books was barely there, as well as the Queen Charlotte. She was not really of a big presence in the books, well, at least in the first four books. I am still very much interested in seeing how the TV shows are going to adapt Benedict's story, as well as I do want to see Eloise's story as well. I do think they kind of fumbled on season three. I wish it could have been better, because the books, I will say, out of the four books I read, Collins was definitely the most interesting, because Penelope had more of a personality in in the books as compared to the other three women in the books. Oh my gosh, I just realized that my mic cut off in the last bit of my video that I was recording. But anyways, what I wanted to say was that these were my issues of why I did not enjoy the Bridgerton books. If you guys enjoyed it, that's really well for you guys. And if you guys still want to read the book, you can I would suggest buying one book at a time and not buy four books like I did, because you might regret it at the end. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the TV shows, but the books just weren't for me. Anyways, thank you so much for watching my second video, and this was all it, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.